The Nakajima Ki-43 Hayabusa fighter, translated from Japanese as Peregrine Falcon, designated as Oscar in Allied code, was the primary aircraft of the Japanese Army Air Force during World War II. The history of this machine's creation is closely linked to the general state of the Japanese aviation industry and the specifics of military orders of that time. One of the key features of the Japanese military organization was the strict division and fierce competition between the Army and Navy commands. This rivalry directly influenced the work of design bureaus. The industry was forced to develop different types of aircraft separately for the Army and separately for the Navy, even if the tactical and technical requirements for them largely coincided. By 1937, 4 years before the start of active hostilities in the Pacific, the main fighter of the Imperial Army was the Ki-27. By that time, the aircraft's design was already considered technically obsolete, primarily due to its fixed landing gear and weak armament. The firepower of the Ki-27 was limited to two 7.7mm machine guns, licensed copies of British Vickers, which was significantly inferior to foreign counterparts, such as British fighters equipped with batteries of 8 machine guns. Under these conditions, a need arose to create a modern combat machine. The main aircraft manufacturing enterprises in Japan were Mitsubishi, Kawasaki, and Nakajima. Mitsubishi specialized primarily in naval projects, later creating the famous carrier-based fighter A6M Zero, while Nakajima focused on Army orders. It was this firm that received the order in 1937 for the development of a new fighter, which received the index Ki-43. The Army Command put forward extremely high and contradictory requirements for the project. The customer sought to obtain a universal aircraft that would combine the functions of an interceptor, an escort fighter, and a maneuverable fighter to gain air superiority. The machine had to possess a high rate of climb, a high service ceiling, significant flight range, and excellent maneuverability. Combining such mutually exclusive characteristics within a single design for the Army aviation proved impossible, unlike the Navy, where a similar task was solved by the creation of the A6M Zero. As a result, instead of one universal aircraft, the Nakajima Company was forced to conduct the development of 3 specialized machines simultaneously: the Ki-43, Ki-44, and Ki-45. The Ki-43 became a light, maneuverable frontline fighter. The Ki-44 occupied the niche of a high-speed interceptor, and the twin-engine Ki-45 performed the functions of a heavy ground attack aircraft and night fighter. The chief designer of the Ki-43 fighter was Hideo Itokawa, who had previously led the creation of the Ki-27 model. Hideo Itokawa is a significant figure in the history of science. After the war, he became a professor at the University of Tokyo and gained recognition as the founder of the Japanese space program. During the development process, engineers had to face the limitations of Japanese industry, in particular, the shortage of powerful power plants. Most available aircraft engines, with the exception of licensed copies of Daimler-Benz, were radial air-cooled motors. For the Ki-43, the 14-cylinder Nakajima Hi-25 engine was chosen, developing power up to 1,000 horsepower. For comparison, the power plant of the previous model, the Ki-27, possessed a power of about 700 horsepower. The increase of 300 horsepower was substantial, however, the weight of the new aircraft also increased significantly. One of the customer's key requirements was to maintain maneuverability at the level of the Ki-27. To achieve the necessary flight characteristics and maneuverability, the designers increased the wing area, which entailed an increase in the structural weight. This created a risk of speed loss, while the technical specification required reaching a figure of 310 miles per hour at altitude, as well as ensuring a high rate of climb. The initial armament consisted of 2 7.7mm caliber machine guns. The first prototype formally satisfied most requirements, although it turned out to be 50% heavier than the Ki-27, and its maneuverability, despite improved power-to-weight ratio, raised questions. 3 experimental models were transferred for evaluation to the Aquino Flight School. Despite successfully passing factory tests, line pilots subjected the machine to harsh criticism. The main complaints concerned poor handling, insufficient maneuverability, and unsatisfactory visibility from the cockpit. In response to the criticism, the design group initiated a modernization of the aircraft on their own. Changes were made to the wingtip construction, the cockpit canopy design was redesigned to improve visibility, the instrument layout was changed, and the hydraulic and electrical systems were refined. In the period from 1940 to 1941, 13 different prototypes were presented for testing. The changes also affected the armament. Serial models were produced in several configurations, with two 7.7mm machine guns, with a combination of one 7.7mm and one 12.7mm, as well as with two 12.7mm caliber machine guns. Additionally, the aircraft received a modernized engine, Ha-105, with a two-stage supercharger, which allowed power to be increased to 1,100 horsepower and improved the efficiency of the power plant at high altitudes. In specialized literature, claims are found that Japanese fighters such as the Ki-43 and Mitsubishi A6M Zero were copied from the American Vought Fi-143 aircraft acquired by Japan before the start of hostilities. However, factual evidence points only to the borrowing of the landing gear retraction mechanism. Otherwise, the American machine served merely as one of the prototypes for study. After refining their own experimental models and receiving positive feedback from flight personnel, the aircraft was launched into mass production. The first modification, designated Ki-43-1, differed slightly from the prototype and was initially armed with two rifle-caliber machine guns. Starting with the 35th production machine, the armament was strengthened with one heavy machine gun, Model 1 Otsu, and later with two heavy machine guns, Model 1 Hei. The total production volume amounted to about 6,000 units, of which less than 1,750 accounted for the first modification. Initially, the aircraft was received ambiguously, but after the installation of a more powerful engine, improvement of high-altitude characteristics, and strengthening of the wing structure for suspending bombs, the number of negative reviews significantly decreased. The Ki-43-2 modification received many improvements, however. The airframe design, as in the case of the A6M Zero, was executed at the limit of technical possibilities. This made deep modernization practically impossible. For this reason, despite the refinements, by 1943 this type of aircraft was technically obsolete and inferior to enemy equipment. A significant problem of the early versions was the lack of self-sealing fuel tanks and pilot armor protection. This made the aircraft extremely vulnerable. When hit by fire, including heavy machine guns, 12.7mm, and aircraft cannons, with which American aviation was predominantly equipped, Japanese machines easily caught fire and were destroyed. At the same time, their strong points remained high maneuverability and decent speed indicators for their time. Later, with the release of the Ki-43-2 model, self-sealing fuel tanks and pilot seat armor plating were introduced. Nevertheless, there were noted cases where pilots removed the armor protection themselves to reduce the weight of the aircraft. Subsequently, due to the high workload at the Nakajima facilities, production was transferred to the Tachikawa factories, where manufacturing of the aircraft continued until August 1945. Tachikawa specialists carried out a number of modernization efforts on the machine. The pilot seat armor was retained, the power plant was improved, and new propellers with altered pitch were introduced. The result of this work was the appearance of the Model 2 Kai and Model 2 Otsu modifications. At the end of 1944, the Ki-43-3 version appeared, equipped with the Nakajima Ha-115-2 engine. A feature of this power plant was the use of a water methanol injection system based on German patents, which allowed for improved flight performance and increased power. Engineers fought for every bit of performance gain, even changing the configuration of the exhaust stacks to generate additional thrust. Despite the measures taken, a significant qualitative leap in efficiency was not achieved. Variants were developed featuring a boosted four-cylinder engine and reinforced armament. Instead of two heavy machine guns, two 20mm Show 5 cannons were installed. Ammunition was limited to 60 rounds per barrel. This modification, designated Model 3 Otsu, was produced in an extremely limited series. According to available data, only 2 examples. Further production ceased due to the destruction of industrial facilities and the subsequent surrender of Japan. In total, about 6,000 units of this equipment were produced, making the Ki-43 the main army fighter of Japan. Despite the fact that the aircraft was technically obsolete by 1943, no adequate replacement was found. The new Ki-84 and Ki-61 models were not brought to mass production and the necessary level of reliability in time. The geography of the aircraft's application was extensive. It was used in China and in the defensive islands in the Pacific theater of operations. In the final stage of the war, starting from late 1944, the Ki-43 was actively used as an aircraft for kamikaze attacks, as the design allowed it to carry two 550-pound bombs. Losses during such operations numbered in the thousands. After the end of the Second World War, some captured machines were operated by the Allies, in particular by French forces in Indochina in 1946. According to statistical data for the last 3 months of 1944, the combat effectiveness of the aircraft remained at an acceptable level. For every 17 lost machines, there were 7 shot-down C-47 transports, 5 B-24 bombers, as well as Spitfire, Beaufighter, Mosquito, Corsair, Hellcat, and P-38 fighters and B-29 strategic bombers. However, the Ki-43 was significantly inferior to modern enemy fighters such as the Corsair, Mustang, and Thunderbolt, and its armament often inflicted insufficient damage on them. Nevertheless, this aircraft remained the main workhorse of the Imperial Japanese Army throughout the entire conflict.